Hi, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us, taking some time out of your busy schedule tonight to be with us. My name is Loretta Cohen. I work for Westchester Communities That Care. We partner with the Westchester Area School District to do this parent speaker series. I wanted just to start tonight by telling folks a little bit about us. If I can get my slides to move forward, there we go. Another way we partner with the district is on something called the Pennsylvania Youth Survey. All of the work that we do as a local nonprofit is based primarily on this data. So it's given to area 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th graders every other year and gives us a picture. It's a longitudinal look, actually, because it's been done since 1999. At attitudes, perceptions, behaviors of area teens in our schools. And from that snapshot, we're able to say, okay, what is happening? What is the picture of what's happening with kids across our area? And we also get to look then at what are the risk and protective factors that we could implement as a community to help, bolster their healthy development. So one of the things we do with that data once we have it, because it's 115 pages and there's not many of us out there, although I enjoy looking over it all, not many people would, I don't expect. So we create public health campaigns out of some of the most prominent data points, maybe the highest risk factor or the lowest protective factor. And then we create this is an example of one connection, was the campaign we did a few years back because we looked at depressive symptoms and saw that those were going up for area youth. And we know that strong connections, not just to your family, but to a good, solid friend group, and also connections in the community with other trusted adults are important. And so that's what that whole campaign was about. This was just one of several of the ads that went along with that. We don't just sit around as a bunch of grown-ups talking to other grown-ups and creating. We also work with area teens to come up. We explain the data to them and have them come up with their own public health campaigns. These are two campaigns that kids came up with around alcohol. The one on the right, you can see this young lady had her work. She worked with a team of kids to come up with her message, and it was put on the transit shelter at the Wawa on Westchester Pike. So when we are able to do something very public facing for the kids, that's a big bolster for them to be able to see that their work has real world value. We do not like to just sit in a room and talk all day about what not to do. We like to talk with the kids about what to do. What is the flip side of what some people would call negative behaviors, right? We have all these pro-social behaviors, just eating well, sleeping well, working hard, spending time outdoors and with other people. And so we've done lots of campaigns with the kids where they're talking about some of those pro things. These are a couple of the last 2 years at Henderson High School projects that we've done with them. And so we just love that we're able to introduce the kids to the data and have them do something very proactive about it in our community. We also just launched this year a parent group called Westchester Unplugged. We very much invite you to join us. You can find upcoming events. We're taking a break for December. We'll be back at it in January. So you can go there to look wcttc.org/events. There isn't anything there right now, but there will be. So that's always a good place to go check us out and see when our next meeting is coming up. We have a coalition. We are in the midst of creating our next public health campaign geared toward our community and adults, looking again at those risk and protective factors. If you would like to be a part of that and have a voice in that, our next meeting is December 11th, coming up at 1 o'clock at the West Goshen Township Building. So we invite you to join us there. And then our next parent speaker series like this tonight is going to be on January 13th. We are talking about parenting in the age of technology. So you will be sure that there will be some of our Westchester Unplugged families there for that. And we'll be able to give a little bit of update or let you know when our next meeting is then as well. I just, before we roll into tonight, because I did have one question and folks can just write in the chat if you want to. I wanted to know what brought you here tonight. Usually, our topic tonight is on underage drinking and substance use, and we are all in this together. We all have kids, and we all know that parenting is difficult. But I'm going to just get a sense of what the ages, are the ages of your kids, or what grades are they in, and if there's anything you're willing to share about what spurred you to be here tonight, that'd be great. I'm going to try to stop sharing till I can get over to my presentation while you're doing that. So this presentation was put together by Mothers Against Drunk Drivers alongside of researchers at Penn State University. You'll hear a little bit from, if all the videos work, you'll hear a little bit about it from one of the professors there. And so we're so grateful to them for putting this together for us. It aligns very closely with a lot of what we do and a lot of points we make in our own presentations that we give. These, again, I encourage you to look, check any of those out with Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. If you'd like to, on their website, I'm sure you could find more information. It is, this is a representative of Nationwide. Again, I had a little trouble getting their videos to work, but they are the national sponsor for Mothers Against Drunk Drivers Power of Parents presentation. So very grateful to them. As far as we go, we actually partner with the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board to pull together presentations like this. So we're also very grateful to them. So the objectives for tonight are just looking at the problem and consequences of underage drinking. They have added cannabis use to this presentation, so that gets addressed as well. We look at the role that peers play, also the role of adults and parents, and then some strategies for what you can do will be peppered throughout as well. Starting straight up, just the comment that alcohol is a drug. We frequently use the term drugs and alcohol, or alcohol and drugs, which sort of in our culture sets it up as maybe something separate from drugs. So sometimes straight out of the gate, I give that as sort of a talking point, is having a conversation. Again, I don't know the ages of your kids, but a lot of times when kids are older, if you're having this conversation, it's maybe ask, why do they think that is? It's a very benign conversation to have. It's not about your child's behavior. It's not about, but it opens the door to have a conversation about drugs and alcohol, period. That's just, I wonder why in our culture that's separate. It gives you the opportunity to clarify that alcohol is indeed a drug, and it has all the same ramifications as a drug. It, alters our brain pathways, it shapes us, it shapes our behaviors in the moment, and can shape our brain chemistry long term. So something else, while cannabis and opioids are a problem for young people, for sure, for the same reasons that alcohol is, alcohol continues to be the #1 drug of choice for youth. So if youth are going to use, and I'm not here to say that many, many youth are using alcohol, but for the ones who do choose substance use, they primarily are choosing alcohol. So we want to make sure that that is something we're having a conversation with. It's the #1 drug used. So alcohol kills more than 4,300 youth every year. There are numbers, and there are real live people behind these stories. And it's easy to gloss over numbers. It's not as easy to gloss over the people. The other thing that is very, very key is how early we start plays a major role in this conversation. Has so much to do with brain development, which we'll talk about later. But when kids start drinking young, they are 7 times more likely to be in an alcohol-related crash, whether they're driving or they're a passenger. It is correlated with them being young and when they start to drink, right? One risk behavior will lead to other risk behaviors, and I think that's what's at play there. My favorite thing on this slide is this scale they have here about these pros and cons, because it was eye-opening for me when I first heard it. But children begin to weigh the pros and cons of alcohol at 8 years old. It's a surprising number. We'd never really associate the age of 8 with needing to have a discussion about alcohol, but that is actually a great age to start. When I say conversation about alcohol, I don't mean a big sit down and this is serious and we need to have a heart-to-heart kind of conversation. You'll hear as we go through the presentation that we really lean on dropping little nuggets of information so that your kids know your values. I think the example I think that brings this point home is just to think about the age your kids were when they first started questioning Santa Claus. For many kids, it's around 8 years old. And so it's not specific to alcohol that 8-year-olds start thinking about alcohol specifically. It's that they're weighing the pros and cons of everything around them. They're soaking up information like a sponge. And at 8, I don't know if you have your tissues nearby, this is very sad, but they stop just believing us as parents point blank. They've started taking in, well, Joey on the bus said, and Uncle Jim at Thanksgiving just last week saw him drinking an awful lot of beer. You know, they're pulling in all these other things and beginning to weigh out in a way they hadn't before. It's part of development. It's actually a good thing. We just have to be prepared for it and be prepared to have some conversations, short, little, dropping nuggets of information. A big point, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, because they're so focused on the traffic related injury and death, of course, is always key to point out that keys are not a solution. They are a solution to a portion of the problem, but there's much more at stake than just car accidents and injury or death from traffic. When you look at all of the underage drinking related deaths, while traffic deaths are the highest at 32%, 32% is about roughly a third of all the deaths. If you look at all of the deaths in total, you can see that it has a lot to do with impulse control, right? We're doing riskier things. We're not taking the cautionary steps that we should when we're doing risky things. And so we could allow, if we allow kids to drink and take away the keys, assuming that has made them safe, we're missing 2/3 of the issues. Just something to be aware of and good conversations to have with your older kids. This is just a snapshot of some of our local data. This was taken from that PAYS survey, the Pennsylvania Youth Survey that I mentioned Westchester Area School District does with our local students. And it gives us this snapshot from 2023, which shows that point that alcohol is the substance most used by teens. This information actually represents kids who answered that they had drank alcohol or used marijuana or vaped or used tobacco in the last 30 days. So this is not representative of kids who, have maybe tried it once at somebody's bat mitzvah or, somebody's wedding. This is gives more of a snapshot of kids who might be using the substances with some regularity. Meaning if you answered yes, you've done it in the last 30 days, then it's pretty recent, right? So that's the measure. Again, this survey is done by social science researchers, both at the state and national level. The national level, it's called the Monitoring the Future Survey. And we have, again, a whole document you can find on our website, wcttc.org/data. If you want access to the whole report or you just want to see our snapshot of it, you're welcome to look that up there. So one of the important things that I point out here at this slide, and it's going to come up again, is that if you can flip these statistics to say that while 26% of 12th graders have used alcohol in the last 30 days, that means that 74% of them have not. And that's 12th grade. You look at 10th grade, it means that 84% of 8th graders have not. One of the biggest issues that our kids face is FOMO, quite honestly, right? We don't want our kids to think mistakenly that most kids are drinking or any of these other, the vaping. I know vaping is seeming like something kids are talking about all the time, but by and large, most kids are not doing that. And that serves us well as parents to make sure that we are letting our kids know. Let's get a snapshot of this. We have this data shot in a brochure we'd be happy to share with you that you can put on your refrigerator and just remind them that the data doesn't play out to match. A lot of kids, they might know kids who have vaped. They might know kids who have tried alcohol, but by and large, our kids are making great choices. If they're in a circle of kids where that's not the case, if maybe they're in the 26%, then you're having different conversations in your house for sure. But still, this is worthwhile information to have. There's a few areas of strength I always point out in conversations like this. I say you're aiming for straight A's, right? Access. You control access to some degree. And it suggests to your kids the value that you put on alcohol in your home, right? If you are controlling the access, you're sending a message that says this is something that we value as for adulthood. Your influence means so much more than you realize. As kids become teens, it feels like they're working hard to make sure we know we don't have any influence. But the fact of the matter remains, parents are the number one influence for most teens. 75%, according to this study I'm going to tell you about. And the other thing is alternatives. When we give our kids alternatives, our teenagers are hardwired for risk. They are seeking out risk. We don't need to shame them or make them feel bad for that. We need to make sure they're climbing trees or jumping off rocks into water. We need to make sure we're giving them opportunities for healthy, calculated risks instead of behind the back, uncalculated risks. Some other things to consider, which again, many of these are going to get brought up, is misperception of use, which, I mentioned when we look at those statistics. The fact is that most kids are not using. If they are using regularly, they are in the minority. Why is that? If they're in the minority, have a conversation about it. Perception of risk tends to be very helpful. Most kids will say they understand that alcohol is risky. So making sure that's clear in your household, it can be really valuable. Just reminders of the risk, which we'll talk about as we go along. And lastly, brain development, which is where we're headed. And that really, by and large, has a lot to do with the risk. Young brains that are not yet fully developed are far more at risk for addiction. They're more at risk for that, I don't know why the word is not coming to me. I just said it. Impulse control, right? And again, this is not specific to your kid. So when conversations are being had, I believe that the conversation around brain development is can be a big equalizer, because the minute your kid tries to say, you just don't trust me, which is a very strongly used phrase for these conversations, um, we can lean back on the fact that it's every human being's brain at their age. It really is not a personal attack on them. The younger we can have these conversations, the better. So again, I'm not sure what ages everybody's kids are here, but if your kids are already teenagers, my famous thing to say is it is not too early to start the conversation, and it's certainly not too late. Your kids are looking to know, they want to know what you think. Again, they might not always show it. And if you're dropping these nuggets of information for your kids, they'll circle back to you. And when they circle back to you and ask why you think what you think, then you're in a really good position with them. This slide does a little bit more. This is really just showing that when children are young, they have all of this brain tissue that is not yet fully formed. And as they age, they get to be a preteen, it gets a little darker, a little more blue areas get solidified. They get to be a teenager. Much of their brain is now pulling. This is why they feel ready to branch out, ready to be on their own. Yet that last piece, the prefrontal cortex, where the executive functioning skills are, as they say, again, that's, planning, reasoning, impulse. Those things are all what's taking place in that part of the brain. And so that's the reason that we say substances, alcohol, marijuana use, they're impacting all of those functions in a fully formed brain. And so that's a second strike on a person who is trying to use those substances and not have that piece fully developed yet. Again, all humans, not just your kid. The roles of friends, I mentioned this a little bit in the beginning. We don't want to let them overestimate how many teens are drinking. I'm glad they had a spot in this slide deck for us to share our local statistics so you could see them. Again, most kids are not drinking regularly, and it's just something we really need to make sure our kids are aware of. Have conversations. They can doubt you, they can question it, they can tell you they don't believe it, but it starts the conversation, and having the conversations is what tonight is all about. We need to have them ongoing. We need to have repeated conversations with our kids just so they know that we value this topic. Some teens, like I said, they know the risks of drinking, and they might just think, I've seen people drink and they don't have any issues with it, right? I've seen my friends drink and they don't have any issues. And that's an opportunity it's validate them. Of course, that makes sense that they would think, could logically know that it's risky and still choose to do it. I eat more potato chips than I should. We all make choices, right? We want to, when we're talking with our kids about alcohol or substance use, we want to make sure we're not painting them out as someone who has done something no human before them has done or considered. We want to create a place for open dialogue around it. And so this idea of that, they're seeing people who are using it and not being harmed is a really good point. Alcohol kills 88,000 people a year, right? So beyond the traffic related deaths or medical deaths that are related to alcoholism and overuse of alcohol, 88,000 people is more people each year than at the height of the opioid epidemic. I think the height of the opioid epidemic was 84 or 86. It was very close, but it still wasn't as many people. And we noticed with opioids because it happened so quickly. You took healthy people who became addicted quickly and who died quickly from that addiction. And so it was shocking. Whereas alcoholism happens for a very long time, over a very long period of time, over a lifetime, and then people die early from it, and it ruins relationships, it ruins careers, it has all these other smaller impacts, so that when someone dies from alcohol, an alcohol-related death, whether it's an accident or whatever, people are not as, certainly the health reason, people are not as shocked and are not as stunned. But if we thought about the numbers, it definitely is. When you equate it to the opioid deaths, I think it makes a lot of sense. Adults have, obviously, peers have a big role in people's lives, but adults do as well. Whether it's conversations with neighbors or other family members, there are a lot of misperceptions out there that adults have. One of them is that this is a blip in their slide thing here. So the fact that some people say it's a special occasion, and yes, okay, that's actually the third one that'll come up. But letting my teen drink at home takes away the mystery. Has anybody heard that? You can just give me a thumbs up in the chat if you ever heard this one or believe this one. You might believe this one. This is a common thinking in our culture. It's not uncommon, I should say. I don't know that it's common, but it's not uncommon to hear this. I recall conversations at my mailbox with neighbors saying, "Well, I'm going to let them drink. I let them have something at the holidays, or I let them try it when they want, so that it takes away the mystery." Exactly what this is saying. It is technically a myth, though. We should be aware of that. I would say I probably believed it before I started this job as well. When I drank when I was a teenager, and I turned out okay, right? This is really hard. This is not a myth. This could actually be fact, right? So for many people, we drank when we were young, and we say, "Well, I turned out fine." So we will always have anecdotal stories of people who drank and it wasn't an issue for. But the statistics don't bear out that allowing a teenager to drink, that they will turn out better or equal to other folks. They tend to have more problems. A future slide will talk about that. And the last misperception is that it's a special occasion. So these are some of the, I don't know if they're all like misperceptions, but they're saying, I guess the misperception is that it's okay because of these things. Lastly, there is a very big myth that that in Europe, if we just did it like they do in Europe, right? And I have heard this, especially working in this field, I've heard this multiple times where people will say, in such and such in England, you just, fish and chips and a beer, and if you're a teenager, that's fine, and wine with dinner and all of that. However, again, what the data shows is that when you compare all these countries to each other, there is no one country that just has this all figured out. There's countries that are better, a little bit better than the US, and there's countries that are a little bit or a lot worse off than the US. But to just say that the Europeans have this figured out is false, because their incidence of binge drinking and high risk drinking is in many, many countries much higher than ours. And some of that could it be, right, related to this idea that it's so much ingrained and that kids are allowed to set up pathways for alcohol in their brain when they're young. It's an addictive substance. So when we use it, we set up pathways in our brain. And when we're young, we're developing pathways so fast and so furious that it's easier to become addicted to things when we're young. It's easier to learn French and calculus, and it's easier to learn addiction, sadly. So it turns out there is decades of research examining all of these factors. It's where they got that last slide. And the data pulls out time and time again that if children or teens are permitted to drink in the home, even in small amounts, even it's New Year's Eve, we're having champagne, you can have champagne. Those kids who are permitted to drink at home, by and large, again, we'll always have anecdotal stories where this isn't the case, but the statistics show that those kids will drink more, meaning that if two kids are introduced to alcohol at a party, they went to a friend's house and the kid found some alcohol in the parents' basement and two kids pull it out. The kid who's been introduced into their home, introduced to alcohol in their home, will drink more in that scenario. Again, anecdotally, maybe not, but statistically, those kids are more likely to drink more than a child who grew up in a home where the parents said, no, it's not for kids it's not for kids with developing brains, quite simply. The other thing they will do is they will drink more often. They will find themselves in situations more often where there is drinking. And I keep saying that anecdotally, right? This isn't true for every kid. And it works the other way as well. You could do these things. You can say, not in our home. We have very strong values. You could have ongoing intentional conversations with your kids about it. You can have consequences that you enforce. You could be doing, everything right. I don't know if there's any of us who are doing everything right, honestly. But let's suppose there was that fairy tale family that was doing everything right. That kid could still drink underage, right? There isn't some magic solution. These are just what the statistics bear out. And so we want to do as much of these things as we can, because they'll know they set our kids up for the best chance of success in this area. The last thing is that kids who are introduced to it when they're young have more alcohol-related problems later on in life as they grow. Sadly, alcohol and interaction with the law, those things can go up together. The other thing would be treatment for substance use. That's more likely to happen to people who have been introduced as a kid. I often will tell parents that your kids are listening. We frequently think they are not listening to us. And they will actively tell us that they think we don't know what we're talking about. And all of that is fine. Your kids may even make choices you wish they wouldn't when they're young. But when you lay the foundations that make sense, and you're open and you have good dialogue with your kids, even if they're making decisions you wish they wouldn't, when they become adults, they kind of circle back. And that's one of the things we're looking for. I try to have everybody, if you're here tonight because you found that your kid has been drinking, I want everybody just to take a deep breath. It is not, you still are a major factor in their life and you still have influence, and you're gonna make a difference in their life. Proof is in the pudding. This whole presentation put together, the Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, right? When they put this together with Penn State University, the data they found surveying, I think it was college freshmen, right? So now these are still 18-year-olds that they are, maybe 19, that they are surveying. 75% of those kids said that their parents are the leading influence in their decisions about drinking alcohol. This is at Penn State University. This is on a college campus. These kids are saying this, right? So that's what I want you to take home tonight. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff I hope you take home as far as information, but I don't want to have you leave not knowing that you are a major factor in this. There are handbooks. We actually have some of them. I'm going to leave a stack of them at our office that people can come in and get. I will send in the follow-up email to this presentation. I will send you the address and where you can find them. They'll just be on in our entryway on a table, and you can come by, swing by and pick one up. These guidebooks are great to have so that you have these conversations again, right? Not just after you heard tonight, doesn't disappear. This is a booklet you can keep on a shelf somewhere. Keep it on the coffee table. Have your kid ask you about it. Gonna just so he really says many of the same points that I have. This is Dr. Teresi who did that study where 75% of the kids. He reiterates that alcohol is the #1 drug of choice for young people. Because he's saying, well, why, right? His thing is why talk about alcohol, and that's why this is still today something we need to be addressing. Yes, there are other things out there that are worth addressing as well. Certainly marijuana use. Certainly if your kid needs to go on pain medication from an injury, we're going to have that conversation with them about how dangerous they are. But alcohol can't be treated as unimportant simply because of the priority it has in our culture. It is at least it might be more important, but it's at least equally as important. We don't have to pull rank on them, but just so a piece of having the conversation with kids is understanding where they are, right? We mentioned before, they land on the impulsive side. They think in the here and now. This is how they operate. That's perfectly normal. We're glad they're doing it. That means they're going through the normal growth development, right? They're going to have a desire for freedom, for independence, separation from you, making their own decisions. And that's not always going to be pretty. They're not always going to do it well. They will be constantly faced with dilemmas. They're saying moral dilemmas here. Certainly risky behavior, but also just interactions with friends. And, how do we converse with them when they're struggling with a moral dilemma? It's a tricky time at teenage life, right? They don't quite know how yet. They're just figuring it out. And we need to be the example for them in how we disagree with other people. If they're having a dilemma, a social dilemma with how to interact with a peer, how do they see you interact with your spouse, right? You're modeling that. When it comes to risky behavior around drugs and alcohol, they're modeling you there too. So certainly, again, a role that we have. You can start with healthy conversations on any of this stuff. I do love to say, I keep bringing up snippets from other things, like a conflict with a friend. This information on how to have conversations with your kids is so good for so many things. It's not really just alcohol. You want to use questions that are asking how and why, or more than that, you just want to know, what do they think, right? You want to be establishing a dialogue that is not just you peppering your kid with questions, which can be tiring for a teenager, actually. So parenting styles, this is something has always been a part of this presentation, because, all parenting styles are not created equal, I guess is what I will say. So if you want to put in the chat the kind of parenting style you think that you have, that'd be great. Just a little conversation. I was in a presentation on this just recently, and people had lots to say about lots of different models. The reason being, we are not all one or the other. We might be primarily one, but then we have smatterings of the other. I will probably never forget the time we were on vacation actually, and I went into the supermarket and said to my 3 middle school, high school age kids, I said, you can get whatever you want. And their eyes almost popped out of their heads. They were like, we can get whatever we want. And I was like, yeah, and I had no idea what was good. They did pretty good. That's permissive parenting. They were shocked because I was not a permissive parent. I was big on rules. But occasionally you're permissive. Occasionally we're authoritarian. Occasionally we're overprotective. We can be all of these things. But when it comes to helping our kids handle peer pressure, there are a couple that outshine the others. These are the
I want to
ones
say
that,
thank you to Sean for putting something in the chat. He said, I used to be, I can't even say it, whatever that first one.
authoritarian.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I can't say it.
Yeah.
But pivoted to positive and still yeah, that one again. When they became
Authoritative.
teens, he did both. Right.
Yeah.
He said when the first did not produce the desired results, that was when he started to pivot to the positive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
authoritarian.
Well, good for you, because it's not easy to do. Some of us are, and how did we grow up, right? If we grew up in an authoritarian household, then authoritarian parenting comes much more naturally to us. So I found it interesting. So I was like, oh, I knew, I went online real quick before this to look up just kind of what we get. What is the outcome of authoritarian parenting, right? Why did in the Power of Parents presentation, why did they decide to highlight that? Because I often think of it as very strict. My way or the highway does not sound like a quality parenting measure, but yet they put a red arrow next to it, like, woohoo, look at this. And the reason I think was when you actually look up how teens or kids, youth, right, respond, kids who grow up in authoritarian households actually are respectful. They learn to be respectful because that works, and it works every time. Being disrespectful never works in an authoritarian household. They'll be responsible. They do their chores when they're told to do their chores. Again, anecdotally, well, you'll have anecdotes where that's not true, but and I think this is why they highlighted it. They can resist peer pressure a little better than the others, which clearly we want that, right? However, they also end up being kids who have lower self-esteem. They end up lacking in social skills in a way that not, other kids don't have an issue with. And they struggle with self-control because someone else was always putting the control on them. And so I just found that very interesting. So they did not highlight overprotective kids who grow up with primarily overprotective parents end up with trouble with problem solving, large dependence on their parents, and very low self-esteem. And permissive parents, the kids grow up being very impulsive, which we talked about impulsivity and substance use. So those two things, are linked. They tend to have lower maturity in permissive parents' households, and they grow up being selfish, is what it looks like. So lastly, we have this positive or authoritative. So we need to not get hung up on the terms because authoritarian and authoritative sound so similar. And really the difference there is just that authoritative is strong guidelines that are reinforced consistently, but not a my way or the highway type model. It's building trust in your kid and saying, these are our house rules. I trust you to follow them. We all agree that these are the consequences if you don't. It's a lot more matter of fact, I would say, a style of parenting than authoritarian. Authoritarian doesn't really give room for dialogue or discussion on and as a teen is growing, remember, in a teen world, they're craving that freedom, that independence, that pull away from you. And this is a way we can give it to them by asking them what they think of the house rules. These are the house rules we've had forever. We've had them since you were 10, and now you're 15. You want to weigh in? Which ones make sense? Are there any that don't make sense? And it's great to be able to parent like that, and kind of fun because you see your kids having your kids weigh in on things. Oh, and by the way, if anybody has scanned this, I apologize because I tried it earlier when I pulled these. I told Mary Beth I just got these slides today. But when I scanned it, it goes to a 404 page not found. So apologies. I will mention that to my contact at Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. All right, a little bit about parenting. So, right, again, having the talk, as I've said, is one of the things we just want to get out of tonight, is to not be afraid to have dialogue around this, and that, yes, alcohol is the thing to talk about. We've touched on a few of the techniques, just as far as, not peppering with questions. We want to have open dialogue. When you are asking questions, it's seeking to learn. You want to treat them as an equal in the conversation, right? You want to be seeking to learn, not seeking to impart wisdom all the time. You'll impart plenty of wisdom. I have no doubt. But it is exciting to hear what they think and how they come to the decisions they're coming to around alcohol or marijuana. Knowing how to communicate your family's values and consequences. I'm a big fan of family agreements, like a family pact on this. And we actually have a sample that we can send you. Again, I'll put it in as part of our follow-up to this. Having a conversation with your child about what should go in your family agreement, I think, is a stellar place to start. It will really help them feel like a part of the process. This is their life. This is right. So if we as adults came in and said, your mother and I talked, or your father and I talked, whoever, and we have determined that these are the rules we want to impose, or we want to, impose, right? That's how it'll feel, even if you don't use that word. These is what we want to lay down for our family. We feel strongly about it. You have to follow them. By the time a kid is a teenager, and even younger, I would say even elementary school, now in elementary school, you probably want to have a contract around something like technology, probably. But when you're developing those, kids at any age can participate in some level. And that is a huge step toward authoritative style of parenting rather than authoritarian. Handling questions about your own history of underage drinking. So this is a famous one. This comes up a lot. Kids, when the conversation comes up, kids probably want to know. Some people will say, oh, we don't talk about that. I think that leads your kids to make assumptions that you might not want them to make. It is find the way that works for you, is what I would say. What I would consider is the truth never hurt anybody. I think there's a lot to be said for telling the truth about your own history. You don't have to go into lots of details or, rampages or anything else that might have been a part of your past. But if you say, yes, I did, and I wish I knew then what I know now, that can be really powerful. You have not hurt your cause one iota, and you've been truthful with your child. So from where I sit, that seems to make the most sense. Happy to take questions if people but start where you are, right? Everyone on this call or everyone who will listen to this recording is in a different place, a different situation with their kid. If you've already allowed alcohol or champagne at special events or things like that, it's okay. You tell them you learned something new and you want to make a change because it's really, you learned how important it is. Tell them why. Tell them about brain development. There's not, we're parents. We're learning all the time and we want to do this thing the best we can. Your kids are not gonna, you're not gonna, begrudge you that.
So Loretta, I just want to let you know that it is 7:25.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very
Sure.
much. I think this is the wrap of it. So we you want to this third one, they say get into the habit of asking permission to ask questions. I would go one further. I would say get in the habit of not asking questions. I am such a huge fan of dropping nuggets of information. Um, when you if you learn something new tonight, say, I learned on this webinar such and such. And your kid might hear you and ignore you and walk the other way. And that is okay. You want this conversation to come on their timetable. And I'm telling you, I learned this from someone else. I wish this was my idea. I learned this from someone else and I tried it with my kid. And when I saw it work, I would say within a week, my kid, and I did multiple different things. It's still shocking to me that such and such, and you just say it again and you let it go. And they'll either respond or they won't, but don't push your kid to have a conversation. Within the week, my daughter came back to me and she said, I've been thinking a lot about, and it was the very topic that I had been dropping these nuggets about earlier in the week. So, and then the conversation is happening on their terms. They're leading the conversation. It's such a more powerful place to be. And then continue to seek information on what they think. It's fascinating. They're amazing, these kids, they don't do everything we want them to do all the time, but maybe they have their reasons. Wouldn't it be good for us to know what they are? Yeah. So they say talk a lot, talk every day. Again, I don't know. You definitely want to start early. The conversations can happen earlier than we think they can. It's so, again, my famous thing. It's never too early or too late to have these conversations. So, and use the nugget approach. They have something called a prom promise. I could not find it when I went to this link again. I'm so sorry. So I did try to go to this link. I did not see it immediately there, but it's a presentation that they do for teens, for juniors and seniors. I think it's a presentation they do in high schools. If that's something you're interested in spearheading, we can get you connected with someone who can help with that. Lastly, just want to acknowledge that we need to set clear expectations. So, you're going to talk about peer pressure, that idea that most kids are not doing it. Maybe kids in their circles are. Again, ask for their insight. What's their best strategy for dealing with peer pressure? Alternatives, that was one of my straight A things in the very beginning. When you can give your kids really good calculated risk in their life, that just charges them up. It's great. Let them go ride dirt bikes and get lost in the woods for a little while, kind of thing, but clear expectations is huge. And that's why I'm such a fan of this contract. I use the word contract a lot, but like an agreement or a pact that you make together as a family so that everyone is clear, everyone starts out on the same level playing field. These are our rules. I think it's a great idea to have your own for yourself. What are the rules for the adults around drinking? Let them know that you have rules for yourself, right? You have standards around alcohol use. They might be different than a teenager's standards should be, but you have them because alcohol is serious business. You can't drink and then drive. You can't drink too much or you won't be able to make good decisions. You don't drink and go to work. Well, what are your things that you value? When you say those out loud, it's very powerful for kids. Um, Definitely, if you already have, if you think your teenager has an issue with drinking where they need therapy or supports, that's another thing where we can put in our follow-up to this. We can put some contact information for where you can go for that. We are having our presentation next month is going to be on technology, but it's with someone from Ethos Treatment, and they're a great place to get help with all sorts of addictions. So we can forward some contact information. They're not the only ones around, but they're the first ones that came to mind because we're working with them. So I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, for your time. I hope some of what we said made sense, and there's some nuggets that we left you with that you might be able to use in your own home. If anybody has any questions, more than happy to take those. I feel like there was another thing. And if you'd like the handbook that comes along with this, it's part of the Power of Parents model, is that you get a sort of a continuing education handbook. It just has some of the same information that's in this presentation, plus a little bit more that you can keep on your nightstand, something just to flip through every once in a while, because these conversations are not intended to be done once. They're things that, work best when you're willing to have the conversation, as it comes up, you know, repeatedly, ongoing and intentional is how we say it.